Hi, everyone, and welcome to the show. This is episode number 3, and today we're discussing the Big Lebowski on your Am I Wrong podcast. My co host today is Kevin Klein. Kevin and I have been friends for a few years now, thanks to our mutual involvement in our local Sunday Assembly chapter. Kevin, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hey everyone, my name is Kevin Klein, no relation. I am the chairman of the board of our Chapel Hill chapter of Sunday Assembly. When I'm not doing that, I'm a data analyst with a major health insurance company. I'm also kind of a musician on the side. I've watched Big Lebowski now after today maybe 10 times.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, it kind of keeps getting better, honestly, at least so far.
Okay, when did you first watch it?
I don't remember exactly. It was maybe within a couple months of it coming out on video, and I actually really didn't like it the first time I watched it. I had no idea. It seemed like it was kind of a movie about nothing, which it kind of still is.
Right, right.
Maybe more about nihilism than nothing, but every time I watch it, I kind of pick up new weird stuff. So it's been a really great movie to repeat watch, which I don't do very often.
Okay. Wow. The Big Lebowski was released on March 16th, 1998, and was written, directed, and produced by the Coen brothers. While it didn't fare well at the box office, grossing only 46 million worldwide, it has become a cult classic with midnight screenings, fan festivals, and there's even a religion inspired by the film. In its simplest form, the movie is about a case of mistaken identity. Jeffrey the Dude Lebowski is assaulted when he's mistaken for a millionaire also named Jeffrey Lebowski. Hijinks ensue when the Big Lebowski's wife is allegedly kidnapped and the dude is hired to deliver the ransom, but his insane buddy Walter schemes to keep it. A lot of hijinks ensued, quite frankly.
Yeah.
I never watched this movie because I didn't even know this movie existed in 1998. I vaguely remember seeing it on the shelf when I would go to Blockbuster on the weekends to rent movies, but I was more interested in movies like Romeo and Juliet or Shakespeare in Love. And so a movie that was dubbed as a crime comedy just was never even on my radar. And since then, I've seen it pop up just because it is a cult classic. So I've heard people talk about it and that sort of thing, but it just never really interested me until I started thinking about all of the things I've never seen and should probably give a chance for my poor pop culturally deprived brain.
Yeah, it's funny you say it's a crime comedy, which I guess it sort of is. And like, yeah, I didn't hear about it right away either. It kind of like bubbled up into the public consciousness, I think, because it didn't do well, and also because the people who did like it were so obsessed with it, they kind of started spreading a lot of the memes from the movie. Like, I quote it kind of accidentally all the time, especially like that's just like your opinion, man, I think might be my most quoted thing.
I think
Um,
I've actually heard you say that too.
exactly. See, um, I think one of the things about it is like it's the language is so weird and so there's so much like repetition of ideas and kind of ideas being bounced back and forth by different characters and absorbed that like it almost becomes like hypnotic in a way, like just how everything kind of like flows throughout the movie. So I think it lends itself very well to memification, maybe in some ways.
But you know what I found out when from watching this movie?
What's that?
Memes lie. The only meme that I've ever actually seen that relates to this movie, or at least that I'm aware of as relating to this movie, is the one with the picture of Sam Elliott, and it's always some statement followed by, "You're a special kind of stupid, aren't you?" And he doesn't say that in this movie.
Huh? I didn't even realize that was a thing. Uh,
It is, I've seen it a lot, especially recently. And I waited the whole movie for him to say it. When he showed up, I was like, oh, good, he's going to say the line. And then he didn't say the line. So memes lie.
yeah, yeah. I guess when I say memification, I more mean like the original pre-internet kind of just an idea, like a small bite-sized idea that's easily transferable. But yeah, in terms of internet memes, yeah, maybe not so much.
Okay. So let's get started talking about the movie.
Sure.
How would
So,
you like to move forward? Not sure the best, because this movie is all over the place. And I'm still struggling. I just watched it last night and I'm still kind of struggling to wrap my mind around exactly what happened because nothing happened. All the characters are in exactly the same place at the end of the movie as they were at the beginning of the movie, except for poor Donnie.
yeah.
And so I'm not really sure where to start in trying to figure out what it's about.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think pretty much every plot point is hinged around a lie, right? Like, a lie or a mistake, or usually both. We start out in like, the two thugs are kind of going after the dude because they think he's the other Lebowski, which in turn is because of his wife lying, and in turn is because of like him lying about actually being a millionaire. So it kind of yeah, everything's just a big bunch of bullshit that happens, and then somebody dies, and then there's no reason behind anything.
Okay, so what that I mean that's basically my takeaway from the movie is Jeff Bridges is incredibly mellow, which is awesome, and bowling is cool, and yeah, that's
Yeah,
about it.
yeah. One thing I really liked that I had sort of forgotten about is all of the slow motion kind of lovingly detailed shots of people bowling and making like probably the most undignified sport I can think of look like a ballet. I think just that by itself, if the movie accomplishes nothing else, I think that was really cool.
Well, it did make me want to go bowling.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. Although I'm terrible at it.
Like, it actually kind of makes me want to join a league to bowl, and that's just bad news for everybody.
I bet you there are probably some amateur like bowling leagues around the triangle. I bet you there may even be like a Big Lebowski themed league. It wouldn't surprise me. Uh,
Oh, then I'd have to buy a purple leisure suit to bowl in.
hey, you don't fuck with the Jesus. So yeah, I think going back to kind of bringing up the point about the dude being mellow, like I think so. I'm gonna get into some of my pet theories, and you can tell me whether or not you think they're dumb.
Okay.
So this movie is kind of very much of its time, right? Like it was filmed in '98, but it's really about kind of the early to mid '90s and about not I want to say about, but commenting on kind of the Iraq War and maybe other things that were going on in American culture at that time. So kind of I think the dude represents slacker culture to some degree, like kind of mellow and laid back and maybe like kind of cynical and not really engaging in world events, and also very passive. And kind of as a contrast to that, you have Walter, who's super conservative and aggressive and kind of, sees threats where there are none. It's kind of, I very often forget that this movie happened before 9/11, just because the constant theme of like Walter kind of seeing a threat and then attacking the wrong target. um, but I think that happening, with Iraq and all that stuff was kind of a byproduct of cultural ideas that had been around since the 90s and since much earlier. So maybe that's giving the movie too much
Okay.
credit. I don't know.
No, I mean you're not wrong. I think it just it's hard to go that deep the first time you watch a movie like this, I think. And so my perspective watching it is just what is happening on the screen, what is the story they're trying to tell on the surface. And I think you had mentioned earlier that this is definitely a movie that benefits from rewatching, and I can see that because the first time you're trying to figure out who kidnapped Bunny, and then the second time you're trying to actually see the thought processes and what's happening, like what people are saying versus what they're actually doing once you know the end of the story. And so I'm
Yeah,
I'm in a
totally.
place where kind of delving deep into those thematics is more difficult for me, but it's very entertaining to hear you talk about it.
Okay. Well, I don't want to monopolize the entire podcast, but I am happy to kind of wax philosophical.
Oh,
Um,
please wax philosophical because then whenever I rewatch it, then I will have more things to think about.
cool. Okay. Well, I'll hit you with another one, and you can tell me if this makes sense. This is kind of a theory or a template that I came up with the last time I watched it, which was actually just earlier today. So I think one of the reasons the movie kind of isn't about anything is it's kind of a meta story, like a story about storytelling. So so if you look at the dude and Walter, who are kind of the maybe the protagonist and the antagonist is even a way to look at it, or maybe Walter's the protagonist. I'm not really sure. They're both kind of throwbacks to 70s stereotypes. Like the dude's kind of the mellow stoner guy. His
Hmm.
character even says that he was involved in like sit-ins and protests and stuff in the 60s and 70s. So he's kind of like
Right,
a 90s version of a hippie, right? And
right.
and then Walter, constantly talking about Vietnam, kind of very jingoistic, very protective of his religious class. In this case, it's his adopted Judaism, which I think is a way of saying like the idea of protecting the religion is more important than any actually deeply held beliefs. But anyway, he's kind of like the opposite, like the war hawk, kind of like non-veteran, like maybe PTSD, having that kind of like what's that dude from Forrest Gump? Lieutenant Dan. But
Oh, wow, that's an interesting comparison.
but yeah, so he's that kind of archetype and that meme kind of taken forward into the 90s. And then you also have Sam Elliott's character, the cowboy, who is like another generation before that, kind of like a cowboy movie archetype, which, those were popular in what, like the 40s or 50s? I don't even, I'm putting this out on the internet and not even having done research. Uh,
I think you're right about that.
but yeah, so he's kind of like the prior kind of story archetype who's these guys are kind of his successors. Like he even like that middle scene in the movie where he's talking to the dude and is like, this is cool, but like I wish you wouldn't swear so much. And like it's kind of like kids these days, like you're doing stuff differently than I would. But yeah, so he's kind of like the prior generation that's giving his storytelling over to these new guys who are in turn like the 90s version of what the 70s guys used to be, if that makes sense.
It does. I'm not sure how I feel about that, but it does make sense.
I mean, the great thing about a movie about nothing is that you can make up as many theories as you want, and there won't be much to contradict any of them.
That is true. That is very true. Is there a particular scene that stands out to you that's your favorite, or do you just like the movie as a whole?
I think I have a different scene every time I watch it. I think any scene where Walter is yelling at Donnie, I don't know why, just like you're out of your element, Donnie. Like, you're like a child who walks into a movie. Like, just and maybe a lot of it's John Goodman, who I just love. He's one of my favorite actors, but like just the kind of casual way he switches back and forth between like talking like a regular person and just like totally shitting on Donnie just cracks me up every time. I don't know why.
Okay.
How about you? Did you have like a particular scene that stood out when you watched it?
Oh, my favorite scene was hands down the ferret in the bathtub.
Interesting. What did you
Just
like
because
about
it
it?
made me laugh so hard. I did not know Jeff Bridges could make those noises, and I could not breathe. I was laughing so hard. So there's no particular deep reason for me liking it other than it was really funny.
It was really funny. Yeah, that was a pretty great scene.
Even though I kept getting distracted because he kept calling the ferret a marmot, and it's not a marmot, it's a ferret.
I have no idea why they refer to it as a marmot. I don't really know what a marmot is. I'm sure it's some kind of rodent, maybe.
It
Anyway,
is. It's a rodent. I Googled what's the difference between a marmot and a ferret because I was thinking maybe they were the same thing and they were just like messing with us, but they're not the same thing and it was deliberately done in the movie and I don't know why.
well, maybe it's because every character has to be lying about their identity or have a mistaken identity, so maybe they had to call the ferret a marmot.
You know what? I like that. I accept that.
Sweet.
Yeah, I totally accept that. So, let's talk about Maud for a minute.
Yeah.
What was Maud's actual purpose in this story other than, or I guess maybe it was just giving us a little bit more information to figure out that the whole thing was a fraud? Is that really all she was there for? What was the point of the whole trying to conceive? And I guess her character just didn't make a lot of sense to me.
Hmm. That's a good question. I mean, yeah, she is definitely kind of, just giving some exposition on a lot of stuff. But she might be, I guess she doesn't lie as much as the other characters. I mean, she does send the dude to a doctor under false pretenses so she can, like, make sure he's fertile. It is, like, kind of another instance of the dude kind of being passive and being used for other people's purposes. So, just kind of, she uses him to get a baby and then she's like, I'm done. See you later.
Yeah.
And I guess kind of her kind of like rich kind of high society like character thing, like she's kind of hanging out with like the Art Nouveau and the Nihilists, so it's kind of a way of tying like the Germans and the Nihilists into the plot too. But yeah, I don't think she's as fully realized as like the Dude or Walter's characters are.
Okay. I I think she just bothered me, and I'm not sure if it's just because she was so pretentious that I
Hmm.
just didn't like her character, or if it was just because she didn't really seem to serve much of a purpose to me, but I struggled. When she was on screen, I kind of started zoning out a little bit.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, the kind of the pretentiousness is grating, which I think is intentional, but may still not be necessarily fun to watch.
Although the one of the final scenes that she had with him was when that other guy was in the room too, and I can't remember his name, if he even had a name, like he was her assistant or friend.
Like the random like giggling German guy.
Yes, yes. That's the same actor who played Remus Lupin in the Harry Potter series. And once I figured that
Ah,
out, it blew my mind because he just looked so different, and the giggling was killing me. But he was Remus Lupin.
wow, I didn't realize that. That's a good catch. I knew he was familiar, but
Yeah, I was watching it and I was like, "Oh my gosh, he's so familiar." And then just he did something with his face and it popped into my head. He looks kind of like Lupin, but he looks nothing like Lupin. And so I looked it up and it's the same actor, which I think it's cool whenever actors are in really, really big franchises that everybody's familiar with, and then you find them in other things.
yeah, totally.
It kind of, I don't know, it sets off my little nerd alarm and it makes me laugh. But
Yeah. On that subject, did you know that one of the nihilists is Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers?
I did not know that. I'm also not really a fan of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, so
Yeah,
I'm
they
not super familiar with them.
yeah, they sucked for 20 years, but Flea's still pretty cool.
I did remember seeing that name in the credits, and I didn't rewind it because I just caught it out of like the side of my vision or whatever, and was like, "Did that just say fleas?" And I was like, "No, it probably didn't," but apparently it did.
Yep, just one, just Flea singular. But yeah, he was the kind of short one with the gap in between his front teeth.
Okay. The other actor that I recognized from this was the blonde thug from the two who started in the beginning. The one guy peed on his rug, and the other guy was swirling the dude.
Yeah.
The blonde one is he was on Lost. He played
Okay.
Jacob on Lost, and he also plays Lucifer on, or he did play Lucifer on Supernatural. So
I can
I
see
was like,
that.
oh my gosh, he's so young there.
I've never seen either of those things, but I believe you.
You should watch Lost. I don't think you would enjoy Supernatural, but you might like Lost.
I think the ship has sailed because I know what the ending is, and I'm not going to mention it because, you know.
Oh, okay. Okay. Did you have any other themes, or is there any symbolism that you think is really important to the movie that the Coen brothers were putting in? I guess in particular as relating to any of the dude's dreams?
Well, there was a lot of phallic imagery. I mean, bowling pins are kind of phallic symbols to begin with, but like, especially the one with the kind of bowling Valkyries.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, there's a lot of that. I'm trying to remember what else. There's one where he was like flying over the city.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that one I didn't entirely get because he was following, there was somebody flying on his rug and he was following that person, and I didn't know who that person was.
I think it was Maud before they introduced her, if I
Oh,
remember right, or maybe like right after, but I think it was Maud.
okay. Because we only saw the back of that person's head, but the haircut was similar, so maybe it was Maud.
Yeah,
But those dreams were trippy. I liked him because he was always so, so happy in those dreams.
yeah,
And I guess at one point he referred to acid flashbacks, so maybe that's what those were instead of dreams, but they tended to always happen right when he got knocked out.
yeah, yeah. They're kind of like good like act dividers that kind of divvy things up. The other symbolism thing I always really like, and I don't know why, because it's such a small thing, is like the scene right at the end where they're bowling before they go outside and the nihilists are there. It starts with Donnie kind of hitting almost a strike, but then one of the pins ends up like staying up, and he kind of
Yeah.
just looks at it and is like concerned for a second, and it's like I don't know, it just seems like a weird foreshadowing thing because Donnie's about to die, and he's just kind of like it's the one time he's never bowled a strike, and he suddenly senses that he's not invulnerable or something.
Huh. I mean, I remember that scene just because I felt bad for him that he didn't get a strike
Yeah,
because it was so close. But I definitely didn't put that together with him dying in the next part. Although I didn't expect him to die. I have to be honest. After they said he had a heart attack and then it cut to the mortuary where they were talking about the urns, for a split second, I honestly thought that it was Walter's dog that died and not Donnie. And
yeah,
that's why they were there. I'm really glad it wasn't because that would have just been even more absurd.
yeah.
But it seemed like it would have fit had it been the dog because of the way Walter was about that dog the whole movie.
That's true. And we never actually see like Donnie being cremated, so who knows? Like it could be another lie.
I don't know, there were a lot of ashes for it to have been that, 5 pound show dog.
That's true. That's true. It could have gotten some like it could have emptied a vacuum cleaner bag into it, maybe. I don't know.
That's awful. So, 25 minutes of talking about The Big Lebowski is not as much time as I expected it to be.
It was more time or less time?
Less time, no
Okay.
less time. We talked about Pulp Fiction for almost an hour, but Pulp Fiction is very similar, but also very, very different to The Big Lebowski.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on in Pulp Fiction. It may be disjointed or weird, but you definitely can't argue that nothing happened.
Right. I seem to be starting this podcast by picking movies that are about nothing, but they're wildly popular.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, people really like quotable movies and movies that have a very distinctive style, and I think both of these movies are like among the most stylized movies I can think of. Like, the dialogue thing, like Quentin Tarantino has a very specific way of doing dialogue and weird pop culture references and arguments and kind of very flowery. Whereas the Coen brothers, especially in this movie, like it's very repetitious and kind of thematic and I don't know, a lot slyer, but they're both very distinctive. Like you can see a second of either of those movies and know exactly what it is and who it is.
Yeah. It is definitely very repetitive. One of my early thoughts in my 80 thoughts about the Big Lebowski was how many times can you say they peed on your rug?
Yeah,
Because in that whole conversation, every other line was they peed on your rug. And it was coming mostly from Walter, but even Donnie got a few in there while Walter was telling him shut up. And it that happened a lot. It was, that one and when Walter was beating up the car that he thought was Larry's.
Yeah, yeah. Do you?
Apparently, that line has been censored for TV at some point. I had to Google that when I saw you post about it on Facebook because I didn't remember that particular line. And so I Googled it and figured out what scene they were talking about, but he just kept saying it over and over and over again.
Yeah. Can I swear in this or?
You already have, so
Okay. Well,
go ahead.
but yeah. So the line for anyone who's not familiar is originally, this is what happens when you fuck a stranger in the ass, which Walter is saying while he's smashing a car up with a golf club. And in the censor for TV version, and I don't know why they thought to censor this movie for TV because, like, there's so many swears, it's just a quarter of all the words are fuck. But the censored version is this is what happens when you find a stranger in the Alps, which just makes no goddamn sense whatever, but I love it because it's so weirdly poetic. So it's worth, I don't know if it's worth watching the whole thing, but it's worth at least watching the scenes with Walter because of all the work they had to do to get it to sound like English and not just a string of beeps. So,
I'm kind of tempted to go find it now just to see what they did because most of his dialogue was not suitable for 90s television.
yeah, I think they decided since there was no way they were gonna make it sound reasonable, they just wanted to have some fun with it, and I respect that.
Do you know if was it the Coen brothers who were responsible for making that edit whenever it needed to be censored, or was it just some random like producer?
That's a very good question, and I would like to know the answer to, but I don't.
You're supposed to know everything, Kevin. Come on.
We can Google it right now. They also had to cut all the boobs out, too. I don't think it was them. Surprising. Oh, and I also see that they apparently couldn't include any scenes involving the Jesus for what are
Oh,
probably
because of
fairly
all,
obvious
yeah,
reasons.
his movements were a little bit.
Yeah, John Turturro was just too sexy for TV. I'm sorry. I guess not anymore because he was just in an HBO show called The Night Of, where he played a lawyer with psoriasis. So, how the mighty have fallen.
Okay. Yeah, I looked it up, but I can't. All I see is it listed on a whole bunch of websites listing the most ridiculous movie edits, but I don't see who actually edited it.
Some genius whose name is lost to the stream of time.
Yep. Okay. Well, is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you wanted to make sure we covered when talking about this movie that you have seen 10 times?
So let's see. We talked about Saddam Hussein. We talked about storytelling in general. We talked about repetition. We talked about lies, some. So maybe to expand a little further on that, like kind of this was at the very beginning of what probably could be considered soundbite culture, I guess. It's even pre the internet as we know it, but this was kind of around the time when people's attention spans were getting shorter and kind of maybe TV news propaganda was starting to be really well honed. And I think to some degree, like the repetition and all of the kind of empty language stuff is a comment on that as well, where they're just these tiny little ideas like they peed on your rug. Repeating they peed on your rug over and over again is just kind of Walter's way of stoking that fire, just kind of a chant of like, you have been wronged without any context. So I think it's kind of commenting on how sound bites can be used to convince someone of something absent any other context or information.
Okay. I feel like I just really don't have that much to contribute to this conversation because I don't love this movie as much as you do.
So you should watch it again.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't hate it, and I really liked Jeff Bridges' character.
Yeah.
Truthfully, I liked Walter's character too, but I think they're the only two that I liked in the whole movie. The millionaire, well, the fake millionaire Lebowski was a dick, and Bunny was Tara Reid. Enough
Yeah,
said there.
she was pretty much
And,
playing herself.
it's just nobody was kind or nice or appropriate except for, I mean, Walter certainly wasn't kind, but the dude was. I mean, his reaction when people broke into his house was just to be like, hey man, this is a private residence, and he's just chilling out in his bathtub.
Yeah. One character we haven't mentioned, and I think it would be criminal not to, is Brant, the Big Lebowski, like the millionaire's assistant.
Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Philip Seymour Hoffman's finest role.
I did appreciate him a little bit, and I felt sorry for him working for the other Lebowski,
Yeah.
but he was, he got stuff done.
Yeah, he might be one of the only people who actually accomplished anything. He also has one of my favorite line readings, which is after he's left a phone message like saying who he is and what he's doing and stuff. He pauses and then he says, "It's Brant," and hangs up. And I don't know why, but that just kills me every single time. I think the name Brant is inherently funny, for one thing.
Okay, I don't think I noticed that line. I assumed when the voicemail started coming, I assumed he was calling because he was in trouble for the rug. Then in the voicemail, he in the second one, he was like, "If you think this is about the rug, that's fine. You can keep it." And so then I was like, "Why is he calling? I don't understand what's going on." And yeah, that's really all I thought about that character.
Yeah, he didn't get a lot of screen time, but he made the most of it.
He did. He did. Well, they all did. I mean, they all owned their characters 100%, which is what you need in a movie like this.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, they definitely committed, especially John Goodman, who again, like, really can do no wrong in my eyes in general.
Yeah, between him and Jeff Bridges, I think it was pretty spectacular character work.
Yeah. I
I can
honestly,
say that.
I can't take Jeff Bridges seriously anymore in any movie ever. He's just the dude in my head now. Like I saw The Fisher King, which I'm sure is a very serious and moving or whatever movie, and I was just like, it's the dude.
Haven't seen it, so I don't know. The movie that I mostly know him from now is it's a gymnastics movie called Stick It, and he was like this world famous gymnastics coach who had kind of fallen from grace, and so he was coaching this world class gymnast who had also fallen from grace, and to see Jeff Bridges doing gymnastics was not something I ever expected to see on my television screen. So,
Huh. Did they have a
yeah.
robot do it, or was it actually him?
Well, so he was kind of past his prime and he didn't really do it. There was only one scene where he was actually doing stuff other than coaching. And in the scene, the character gets injured, so it probably was really him.
He probably actually got injured.
Yeah. But you just don't expect Jeff Bridges. When I think of Jeff Bridges, I usually think of action movies, and I don't know why, because I can't name a single one that he's in, which I feel like is a really, really terrible thing.
He was in Tron, both the Trons actually.
I've not seen Tron is on my list. It may pop up in a future podcast, but I haven't seen it. Either of them.
He was in True Grit, which is also a Coen Brothers movie. It's not an action movie per se, but he played a grizzled cowboy, so.
Oh, that's the remake of the John Wayne movie, right?
Oh yeah, I think it is a remake. I haven't seen the original.
Yeah, so I think maybe all I've ever actually seen Jeff Bridges in is Stick It. And I feel like that can't possibly be right because I knew who he was and I recognize his face, but I can't place him anywhere else. But a gymnastics coach on one hand and then the dude on the other is just very, very different.
Yeah,
But the dude did have great hair.
that is true. He was rocking the full, like, 90s metal slash hippie hair. I
Almost surfer hair.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he might have even had a man bun like before it was cool. If not a man bun, then at least like the Kevin Costner from Waterworld, like top of the head ponytail.
Another movie I have not seen. I
Waterworld,
feel like I feel like that everybody who comes on this podcast with me is going to talk about movies that I haven't seen, which is the point of the podcast, and that's great. But man, it just makes me feel like less and less of a cultured person.
Well, I wouldn't exactly call Waterworld cultured. Uh, but yeah, I think it would be fun to like go back after you've watched these movies if you do this for a while and kind of like footnote and like say like, "Oh, we talked about this movie at like 31:57. Here's a link to the podcast where we talk about the actual movie." But yeah, Waterworld is fucking terrible. Like holy shit. It's bad in a really good way. So to give you a sense, it was the first movie that I saw at Brian and Nichelle, our ex Sunday Assembly compatriots who are now founding Sunday Assembly Salt Lake City, but their bad movie night, we watched Waterworld and like I liked it because it's very sincere in its badness. Like it really commits to the level and the kind of bad that it wants to be, and it's very consistent the whole way through. And yeah, I kind of like it, even though it's a really terrible movie.
There are really terrible movies out there that I like. I have to own that. So that's fair.
Yeah,
Okay. Anything else before we wrap up?
I can't think of anything else. I think I've probably overanalyzed and given much more credit than maybe the movie even deserves.
You know that's not true. Movies are as good as people interpret them to be, which is why everybody yeah, it's just your opinion, man. I totally butchered that line, but you know what I'm trying to say.
I do. I would like maybe someday after the movie has sunk in a little bit, if you watch it again, we can do a recap or a revisit or reprise podcast and see if any of those themes have struck home or anything.
Okay. That we can probably arrange a special shorter episode to go over it if I ever rewatch it. Which I
Sweet.
probably will. I mean, because like, I didn't hate it. I have to say, when I started watching it and Jeff Bridges was on the screen and he was just talking like this mellowed out surfer dude, my first thought was, this is going to be entertaining. And
Yeah.
so I wasn't dreading watching it. I wasn't watching it just because I had to. Like I legitimately did enjoy it, but only from a very surface level, this movie made me laugh kind of way.
Yeah, I think that's good for a first viewing. Someday
Okay.
you'll go deeper.
One day. I'll be back next week with another episode of Pop Culturally Deprived. Until then, please rate and review us on iTunes. If you want to get in touch or be on a future episode, you can follow me on Twitter at Mandy K. You can email me at mandyk@popculturallydeprived.com, or you can comment on this post at popculturallydeprived.com. Until next time, I'm Mandy K.
Well, that's like just your opinion, man.